So I think I'll at least begin. I want to thank you for coming to the Community Engagement Workshop series. This is the fourth and final episode within the series, workshop in the series. And Dr. Tumiel-Berhalter is back again. Thank goodness. We are very, very lucky to have her, as she's extremely knowledgeable and also very engaging. So I think you're going to enjoy this presentation, and I'm actually going to turn it over to her in a moment. I'm just asking that you please complete any of the evaluations that I give you. Again, I'll put it in the chat twice, but I will also be sending it to you twice. So you can ignore it if you've already completed it. We really use those in order to improve programs and also to report to our funding sources. And Laurene, over to you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. And for those of you who have been on before, we use kind of the same approach to all of our presentations here. So today we're going to be focusing on maintaining community collaborations and sustaining partnerships beyond your initial goal or purpose for creating that partnership. And just to get us started, a word waterfall with what concerns do you have about maintaining community relationships once the project, program, grant is over? We take a minute to do the QR code and put in a few things that you might have some concerns about.
Great, and I also put the link in the chat if you're interested in entering that way. That will work as well, and then I will be sharing that with you in a moment. You can put up to 3 responses for this one. Whatever comes to your mind will work.
Yeah, these are great. Yeah, I think we can go ahead and stop and move on. I think we address these in my comments, but those are really big concerns, and especially depending on where you are in your academic trajectory, especially if you're at an assistant level, professor level, needing to go up for tenure. Those can be really intimidating concerns. So hopefully we can address some of those and give you some tips on how to maintain those relationships and make short work of it, because those are all very real. And let's see. Okay. So yes, let's address these, and please, if you have questions as we go along, don't hesitate to ask that question, and we can have some conversation about the concern and also, some strategies on how to address it. Again, going back to the community engagement continuum, and I know throughout this series, we've really wanted to address the whole continuum because every opportunity for community engagement is a really good opportunity and can contribute to the trust building. So even though many of my comments are geared more towards the involving and shared leadership aspect of it, outreach and consultation is still a really big part of it, because it's a great way to engage your existing partners even when you don't have a project to work on together. So just thinking about, as we've looked through identifying a partner and looking at the partner or partners that maybe you've worked with over time to help to meet your research goals or your educational goals, policy goals, it's always good to step back and really reflect. What did you learn from the partner? Was there a benefit to working with the partner? But was it a benefit for the partner as well? Were you able to contribute to your partner's agenda? And did you add partners along the way? Because you identify gaps or areas of expertise that you need some advice on along the way. And all of that is perfectly fine. So thinking about how your process went as you were because when we talked about doing a community engagement plan, and it's always good to have that like thought out. But as you're developing your relationship with your partner, that can change and evolve and maybe take on a completely different face. So during the process, during whatever your goals were for that engagement, you're kind of always doing a little bit of where are we? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to make some adaptations? And I feel like pivot is probably one of the biggest words that we use a lot in community engagement, because we have to pivot a lot when we're working with multiple community partners, because the cultural context and the community context changes without notice. So, but to think about that, and then think about, like, as you followed your community engagement plan, you set this in place, you had your community partner look at it, they're kind of on board with what you're thinking about, and they're moving forward. But did you have to adapt your plan midway? Did it go as planned, or not? And again, most likely, probably not. There's probably nothing that went completely according to plan. But what adaptations did you make? And I'm going to make a plug here for process publications, which I think that's one of the challenges in terms of time constraints that a lot of investigators face. But I think sharing what you learn along the way, sharing novel strategies that you use to address a problem, those are publishable things. There is a home for those types of papers, and could help to build your publication record, even though you're in the middle of an engagement plan. So I do want to put a plug in for that. We actually have two investigators when we talk about the consultation aspect of community engagement, that one paper is published and one is in revise and resubmit on their experience doing a community engagement studio. So again, even though that's a tool for a one-time consultation, two investigators are currently, again, one is a publication, one has a revise and resubmit about how that consultation impacted their approach to doing their work. So people are looking for this type of information. And then again, somebody had mentioned the changes in the community. Did their community or research priorities change? I mean, COVID was a huge component of this, where things had to change on a dime. Same thing with the mass shooting in May on the East Side. Things that were planned both from a program perspective or research perspective all had to shift overnight. And how can you adapt that so that you could still meet your goals or adjust your timeline to be better in tune with your community partners?
We have a question. Can you share the link to the publication you just talked about?
I can. I will have to look for it and get it for you.
So that's fine, and then I will send it to our inquirer. Thank you.
And Grace is a co-investigator on that publication from the CTSI or C Studio. So yes, I'm sorry I don't have that ready.
No problem. I can easily send it.
All right, great. Okay. So then when your plan is over and you're kind of at the end, assess your plan. Like, how much adaptation did you have to do? Review your rules for engagement. Did you meet them? Did they change? And were there surprises? I feel like there's always some sort of surprise. And it could be positive or negative. It could be like, well, this wasn't exactly what I signed up for. Or maybe it's like, wow, we started going and next thing you know, we had all these things that we were working on. So it could really, it can really change dramatically from the plan that you initially put in place, depending how much synergy there is with you and your partners. You are going to face challenges. This is undeniable. So thinking about the challenges that you face, how did you address them? And how did you collectively come up with some solutions? So remember, this is about a partnership, and it's not for you to just solve the problem as in a researcher or an investigator, but it's to collectively to think about, well, what would work better, or how can we kind of navigate this tricky situation? Thinking about what worked well and what didn't. Partnerships are not perfect. I mean, they're not perfect when we have academic partners, and they certainly aren't perfect when we're kind of crossing a divide here between the academic and the real world. And then thinking about, like, did we both benefit? This win-win is really, really important. And I always would encourage investigators, again, to do a lot of reflection. Did you really learn something from the community that you thought, oh my gosh, I would have gone down a path that I didn't plan on? Did you enjoy it? Truly, and I mean this with the utmost respect, but if you don't like it, don't do it. You know, like that kind of comes across if you're really not enjoying it. And if you want to move forward with this partnership, are you doing it because you have to or because you want to? These are, you know, I mean, it seems like a very fundamental piece, but in my experience, and I feel like I've heard this from other people who really who have done a lot of work in the community, they really like it. They like that they're building these relationships outside of the community. They like what the community members are bringing to their work. And so, you know, we all spend too many hours in the day working to not enjoy what we do. So trying to force something or force a relationship isn't good for anybody. So thinking about if you really want to do this and thinking about yourself as a trustworthy partner. Were you trustworthy? Do you really feel like you were transparent and put your best foot forward? And were you comfortable doing that? You know, we all have, and not saying that, you know, some things we need to navigate, but from a university perspective, I know we've talked a lot about in the last couple of weeks, indirects with our community partners. And what does that mean with all the media around indirects and what we get out of that? Are you willing to be that trustworthy partner to take the time and explain it and kind of work through those issues? And it's also not only just you being a trustworthy partner, but were you also a trustworthy member of the university? You're representing the university, and whether it's an educational connection, again, research, but we in the community are building UB as a trustworthy institution. And I think that that's something that we really need to think about because we are part of a much bigger thing. And we are working collectively to help UB and whatever institution we're part of to be trustworthy. So now what? Like, you've kind of thought about this. The grant's over, the project's over, maybe the semester's over, so the students aren't as engaged anymore. And you really are at a crossroads where you need to make some decisions about, am I maintaining this? Am I not? Oh my gosh, all those things. What about staffing? I don't have time. What, you know, if I don't have money, how do I maintain this relationship? And these are all very real concerns for the next, what's like the now what? What do we do moving forward? And what I recommend is have that conversation with your community partners. Truly, there are maybe the community partner doesn't want to maintain the relationship. Like, let's be real, it's not always just about us. But having that conversation about, I don't have any money, I don't have any time for staff to put on this. It's summer, so I don't have any students to help you out. So I want to scale things according to what we really can do. You know, what time is available? What are our landscapes that we have to deal with, both in the community and in the research world and the university world? And our priorities, are they still the same? So really being able to sit down and have that conversation, especially if you're at a collaborative partnership stage with your community engagement goals, because this is reality, and community organizations and community partners recognize that we all have these ups and downs in time and resources. So let's just lay it all on the table and have that conversation. But this, again, should be a collaborative what's next. Now, again, if you're doing a one-time consult or, you're doing some outreach and that's really, okay, it's over, it's done, that's fine. But when you're really thinking about long-term partnerships, what is it going to look like? And be creative about it. There is no one way to set this up. There's not one way to continue the partnership. It's not that you have to be in touch every day. It's really thinking about active listening and listening to each other on both sides, on both partnerships, about what is really motivating and what is really strong. We talked a lot about investing in when we were starting new partnerships, thinking about those strengths and leveraging those strengths. Well, that partnership probably identified a lot of strengths by coming together. So what are they and how can you leverage those even more? And being real about the evolution of your goals and, of interest, about the cultural competencies that have emerged or that still need to emerge. And are both parties, our community partners, are they thinking about, well, we could do this together, we could do that together? Because one of the things that I really enjoy is when our community partners are like, oh my gosh, it would be great. We have a after school program for teenagers. We would love for you to come and talk about career opportunities. Maybe it's not anywhere related to the project that you worked on, but there's a way to maintain that relationship by simply doing something that takes an hour of your time to continue that relationship. And always looking for new ways and creative ways to engage with each other. So how do we keep in touch? And okay, the grant's over, the semester's over. Sometimes it's just periodically sharing some news, checking in. Hey, how you doing? What's new in your world? Do you want to get together for some coffee, or do you want to just, I heard you got a new program funded in your organization, or you got a new leadership person. Like, you've worked together, so you found these common connections. And you could always just touch base on some of those things. I've noticed that good relationships, it's just like any friendship, right? Like there are things that you can connect with and people that you can connect with that you haven't seen for 10 years, but you connect and it's always something positive. Most organizations and groups have listservs and mailing lists. Get on them. Make sure you're receiving information and that you're sharing information. We have lots of listservs. We like to keep our community partners on if they want to be on, just to have that connection. And if you have it anyways, it's not a heavy lift to just add someone to your listservs. Many community organizations have partner meetings or collaborator meetings and coalition meetings, and those are great ways to just be visible, be present with your groups, and participate in their outreach. Many community-based organizations or any industry, sometimes they have food drives or they have coat drives. Participate in those. Like, I'm gonna put something up in my building, and if I do a coat drive, and I'll make sure we give them to you and contribute to your coat drive. Those are things that just leverage one another's strengths. And to think about outreach, many organizations, schools, providers offices, they have outreach events that you don't have to create. They're already there. But be strategic about when to participate in them. You don't have to do every single thing, but there might be one that's a really good fit for, either your work or your team or your interest. And I keep saying your, but when I say your, I mean collectively your team. It doesn't always have to be you as the PI or investigator. There are times that having that face-to-face is really important, but you don't have to be at every single event. I mean, truly, sometimes I think if I had to be at every kind of connection event, like that would be my whole job. And we all know that we can't do that. But having a strong team and engaging students and engaging other volunteers in those efforts really help and still have you visible, but where it doesn't always have to be you physically there. And that includes having a strong point person. There are some people that really enjoy doing this type of thing and just being the connector. I have people out in the community. I have colleagues out in the community that I don't have to connect with 20 different organizations. They'll be like, send me one email and have 5 different things on there. Do you want to participate in this? Do you know, this is coming up, this is coming up, this is coming up. So it's almost like a community informant on some, and it certainly doesn't cover everything, but it's a good way to like keep abreast of things in a very simple way. The other thing, and this kind of relates back to the consultant piece, keep a list of your participants, whether they're research participants, your community partners. Invite them again if you have something new. Ask them to participate. Send them updates of your study. The participants very much enjoy learning about what they contributed to. You know, having a newsletter, but the consultations, I think, let's say you ran a study and you have you kept a mailing list, you invited people to stay on a mailing list to be updated about things. Then you can say, you know, I'm doing, I really need a consult. I'm going to do a community engagement studio on my next project. Invite them back. And then they feel like, oh, I contributed to your research study. You find my opinion valuable and you're inviting me back to something else. So there are ways to do this that are, again, relatively simple and inexpensive. And thinking about community products, giving back to the community. I know we talked about that a lot. That's part of the engagement plan, is what the community wants out of this. And, you know, oftentimes the community is really appreciative of any sort of resource. Students, if a community group says, oh, you know, I would love to do X, Y, or Z, but I just I don't have the staff to do it. Oh, but you know what? I have a student that would do it. Or, you know, I'm writing my next proposal. Maybe I can integrate that into the next proposal. You know, leaving resources behind, whatever your program developed, leave that behind for your community partners to use at their leisure. I mentioned on the previous slide about disseminating research findings. I think this is really important to community partners as well as to participants. One of the things that I really enjoy is doing results parties where we invite people from our studies that participated in the study to come back and hear about preliminary findings. We know that all the analysis might not be done for a year, but you could do some very, very preliminary results and invite people back, order a pizza and a salad. And we've done this a couple times and have always had 20 to 30 people show up. And then the conversation that's generated is phenomenal because it starts to integrate like new research questions based on that conversation. And also going back to your community partners and offering to do a presentation to their leadership, to their board. You know, you spent the time to work with us on this. We want to at least give you back what we found. And again, it could be preliminary. It could be a series of things. Oh, we have an update. Can we share this? You know, can we come back to your board and share this a little bit more? You know, thinking about how your work contributes to policy or systems change. Again, lots of creativity about thinking about new approaches, providing education. We do that a lot at the CTSI. We do a lot of, you know, our board knows that, or our board knows that we're participating in this research, but they really want some more information on kind of what we're doing, how we're doing it. Can you come back and talk a little bit about what research is? Or again, an after school program or whatever type of group. Can you come and talk to the group so that they can learn as we go? And offering job opportunities, sharing, if your team is hiring, sharing that with your community partners, maybe having roles in other projects or other things with your community partners. It might not result in anything, but I think the gesture is always really appreciated, and then they can share it accordingly. UB Jobs is really hard to navigate. So if somebody knows that you're hiring, it's always helpful to share that broadly with your community partners, and then they can share it, down the line. And then people know what to look for once you get into UB Jobs. We talked a lot about, especially at the partnership level, the partnered level of engagement, going in with the idea of long-term commitment. And again, like, you want to go in with that, but that does not mean that the relationship doesn't change and evolve, that there's ebbs and flows where you're communicating all the time, and then there might be months or even years that go by that you don't. And that's okay. I mean, again, if you go back to any friendship or relationship you've ever had, there are people in your life that you might not see for 20 years and you could pick up like it's no tomorrow. There are people that you have that have just kind of faded. Your relationship dissolved and faded for no really good reason. You've probably had relationships that have ended for a very good reason and a very obvious reason. That happens with community partnerships as well, when you're engaging at different levels. So this is not meant to lock in, but it's to lock you into something that you can't navigate. But it's really meant to go in with a good, positive aspect of it. But then it's just like any other relationship that ebbs and flows. And thinking about, if it worked in some relationships, some partnerships are not going to work. And that's okay. That is okay. If there's a change in mission or goals, that's fine. Sometimes there's a change in leadership, and that totally changes the dynamic of the relationship. These are all okay things. So again, it's like you go in with best intentions, but then relationships will evolve just like any others would. So I don't want anyone to be feeling constrained by the idea of a long-term commitment. Time is certainly an issue. It very much is. And again, the PI face-to-face is important, but it can be very strategic. So thinking about getting your teams involved. The one thing that I have found that I think created for me a comfort zone, especially as a young academic, was I had the support of my chair and other mentors to do this work. So when my funding ended and I had this group of community people that wanted to stay engaged, and I was like, not quite sure how to do this, my chair was like, if you can find a way, do it. I'm on board with this. Like, we don't have the money. I can't give you a budget for it, but if you can navigate this where it's on a volunteer basis for a while, I'm good with that. So he gave me his blessing to continue the work that we were doing. And he supported it, he endorsed it, and valued it. Even though there was not like financial incentives, but he allowed me my time to spend building it and maintaining it. Build your partnerships into an academic timeline, which I know is very difficult, especially if you're on a tenure track. Some of the people that I have met with, both postdocs and other faculty that might be coming here to UB, have asked that question directly, like, how do I do this? And truly ask for help. We can from the CTSI and our community engagement core, if we can help navigate developing some of those partnerships or finding the right partnerships, it could cut some of that time off of your general timeline than if you're having to cold call someone. We are here to support and to try to make that easier for you. And yes, it's going to be time on your end. But if there's any way that we can cut down that time, that's what our core is here for. So let me stop there. Are there any questions so far?
There's nothing in chats.
Okay, because I kind of buzzed through that very quickly. So what I thought we could do is go into some breakout rooms, and I'm just looking at probably 2. And I have a little scenario here. I'm just thinking about disseminating the research in community findings, but also really focusing on this scenario. You just completed a grant or program, if you're not a researcher, to study nutrition habits in underrepresented communities. You partnered with Feed More Western New York, which is a great resource in our community, and several food banks to plan your study and recruit your intended community. Your grant has funds to support the contribution of community partners and study participants, but you have no resources to continue to pay your partner to plan next steps. But you want to continue this partnership, so what can you do? So if we want to go into the breakout rooms and spend, what do you think, maybe
10 minutes?
10 minutes sounds perfect.
Okay. And Grace is 1 and Laurene, you are 2.
Okay, great.
Okay. I'm going to open up the rooms in about a 10-minute breakout session. Everyone should be back now.
Okay. All right. Well, our group had a great conversation. I don't know if anyone wanted to give a high-level overview, or if group 2, or we were group 2, if group 1 wanted to give some thoughts about just a high-level overview of what you guys talked about.
Yeah, so we talked about setting up a partnership with students or other volunteers, maybe offering credit to the students, since we won't be able to pay them, but they could get credit through the school, or just volunteers, finding students whose interests align with the partnership, and having volunteers, and also just constant communication with regular check-ins, maybe once a month, just to figure out everything and check in and find out what the partner needs, if there are any needs of the partner, and whatnot, and just staying in communication.
Does anyone from our group want to give a few thoughts? And I can certainly share. I know we had talked a little bit about extending networks to others, connecting with partners, just like in a thinking of you sort of way, or if you see that there's been something new or a change made on your, like in their leadership or something like that, just so that you know that they know you're on their radar. Asking them what they want to know about results, and sharing expertise. And like the example was clinical expertise, when you're in a group that maybe are at high risk and have lots of questions, just being able to answer those ad hoc really help build relationships. So great. This was a fun breakout. So any other thoughts or comments before I have a few more thoughts? So what I wanted to just share with you, I did this backwards. Okay. Just, sharing with you sort of my experience on, disseminating findings that, again, I shared about the results parties. I want to plug our science cafes that will be we're implementing this year, which are kind of like lectures in the community, but not lectures, more conversational. But it's having somebody come and speak about their work, but they're really community driven about something of interest to the community. And then we identify potential speakers to come and talk about their work and have a conversation about it. We've also done some work in community newspapers and radio shows. Radio, there's some local radio that are always looking for speakers on different things. Certainly using social media, a one-page summary of results to participants, that like goes such a long way. Or planning at some sort of dissemination event with the community partner. And then I just wanted to share a little bit about a group that I've worked with now for almost 25 years. It'll be 25 years this June. And 15, not 25, I'm making myself older than I actually am. And sort of just to show some of the highlights. In this group it's a group of patients that was originally identified from 2 partner practices. But again, over 15 years, practices change and patients go elsewhere and things like that. So they're not necessarily affiliated with specific practices as they once were. But this was, it kind of came to be because we got a grant to do a practice-based intervention. And, back then we were doing a lot of practice-based work, or you were doing interventions with patients, but actually interventions need to work collectively for practices and for patients. And so we wanted an advisory board of patients to help us plan this on what would work for them. And their vision that they developed was a community of educated and involved patients working hand in hand with physicians and making decisions about their own healthcare. You'll notice that the word research is not in their vision, and that's very intentional because their work isn't about research. Their work is about making the community better, and research is just one way to do that. So it's really a tool in their toolkit to be able to make that happen. Helps us bring in resources, try different things, etc. So this was back in 2010. The patients that are involved are mostly African American, low income, female, and definitely 40 and above, probably closer to 50 and above, since we've been working together for so long. And I'll tell you that they are way too sick for how old they are. Lots of complex chronic conditions and lack of access, all those things that we talk about a lot. And I'm not going to go through this, but just to kind of give you a scope of, our world over the last 15 years, there have been stops and starts. We had lost funding, and basically I said, I want to respect your time, and I know we still want to keep working together. So what if we meet once a month? And we did that twice, maybe. And the patients were like, this isn't working. And my heart kind of sank because I really got to like so many of these individuals. And they're like, we need to meet more, which floored me because they felt like once a month there was no momentum. We were just kind of recapping every time we met because people forgot what was happening. So the idea of this being really action oriented was very important to them, and that they needed to feel like they were doing something, just not being talked at. That, that every time we met, they could roll up their sleeves and work on something. So we met twice a week or every other week for months without funding. And then after that, we'd get small grants here, small grants there, like things would just start happening. They weren't the big NIH grants that as researchers we want to get, but they might be foundation grants. We got lots of funding from the Susan G. Komen Foundation, for Prevent Cancer Foundation, from like all different New York State. We had some funding from New York State, We did have some NIH funding a couple times. So it was this like, we don't need to get paid for this if we feel passionate about it. If you have money, we want to get paid. Like this doesn't mean we're freebie forever. But if we're in a lull, let's just, but you can give your time. And again, I had my chair's support to do that, to have my research associate team work with me on this, in a managed way so that we could actually make some progress, but yet, they're getting their other work done that does have funding attached to it. But they appreciated just the fact that we were willing to do that, even if we didn't have resources. We weren't going to just be like, we're done. So I found that the small projects really go a long, long way. It might not be viewed as favorably from a promotion and tenure point of view, but it allowed us to do a lot of good work that did do policy change, and health services change. And so I'll give you one example is that we always worked with, at the time we were getting started, that was when mobile mammography became available here in Western New York. And we developed a relationship with the mobile unit. This picture down here is from a walk that we did that was funded from Susan G. Komen. And that was because one of the issues is that people in the community were concerned about breast cancer, but they're not going to pay to go to a walk in Delaware Park. That's a fundraiser, but they needed the education. So this is almost ridiculous. We got a $5,000 grant to put this walk in right through here before the medical campus was really the medical campus. And it really was to bring education and just connectivity. And we did this 2 years in a row, and we had about 300 people show up each time. The first one, so we held them in October for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. The first one was frigid. It was so cold. The next one was torrential downpour. So we said, maybe this isn't the best idea. But at that time, mobile mammography was just starting, and we had the mobile unit there. And I think out of the 2 years, we might have screened two or three women. But we had practice partners, and we said, well, what if the bus in follow-up was at your locations? And they agreed to that, and we had 70 women screened, which led us to say, well, maybe this is like with a ticket. People don't want to get screened in a park, but they don't mind being in a mobile unit adjacent to their primary care provider. So we created systems, and we had to create workflows for that, so that the front office staff wasn't bombarded by another 50 women a day. So our patient group created a patient ambassador role where they were paid to be at the practices on those days to help register women, navigate them so it didn't upset the workflow of the office. They helped with scheduling women at some practices. They did follow-up phone calls at some practices. And so really created a little mini workforce, which really was wonderful as this was a new model. Now, our last funding source just ended, but now the bus is outdated and it's been breaking down. And so we're looking at new models. So even though for 10 years we were able to create a model that really worked in primary care, all good things come to an end at some point, and we really need to think about new strategies for how to increase breast cancer screening in primary care, and in low income groups. So, but that had those elements of policy change, systems change. We got the mobile unit working together with cancer services projects so that people who were uninsured or underinsured could get into their system and get on the mobile unit the same day, where usually there was a couple week delay. So just kind of creating those systems that benefited the patient the most. So we're currently working with those practices to think about what's next, what do we need to do, how can we like think of something that's a little bit uh my fear is that in some of those practices, women got so reliant on the mobile unit that if it's not at the practice, they won't get screened. And so what do we do about that and how do we move forward? So lots of transparency along the way, lots of action. Again, small projects really do go a long way. And our group, I have 2 people that are still part of our steering committee that meet every other week that were at the very first meeting that we ever had. And we know each other's families, we talk on the phone, we do stuff. Like, it has evolved into a very again, very genuinely affectionate and respectful relationship. And we have seen many of our original members because they are so ill. Many of them have passed away. If I look at this picture, I would think probably half of the people in this picture have passed, maybe even more. And so that's something that long-term relationships, especially if you're more at a grassroots level, they don't tell you how to deal with that when you have teams that are experiencing grief at the same time. It's very difficult. And so I think about those things very differently now, because those were things that I certainly didn't plan for when we started this group in 2010. Would I have in any way imagined that in 2025 we would still be meeting twice a week with 5 members? But we are, and then we have a larger extended group that will come together if we do community canvassing, or if we do a group project where we need more hands on deck. They are at the ready to participate, and have also participated in other investigators' work too, if this is the voice that they'd like to hear from. So these are, I think, kind of things that I've seen over time that have really worked. I know, and I'm sure many of you have worked with community partners. This group didn't feel like they had a voice, and nobody had given them a voice. Early on, when we were very familiar with the practices as well, the providers would call me and be like, you don't even have to tell me who's part of Patient Voices, because they are acting differently when they are in my office. They are asking more questions and asking for more clarification. And they're like, we just know because things are different. And they would say it with a chuckle, because it was like, they wanted their patients to be advocates for themselves, but so many didn't know how to be. And I saw their interactions with each other and how they encouraged each other to be advocates for themselves. And it has been a truly inspiring journey over the last 15 years. And so with that, I will stop sharing and would love to have any conversation or questions that you all might have about, or experiences that you've had in maintaining relationships with community partners, either from any research perspective, educational perspective, anything like that.
There are no questions in the chat at this time.
Have any of you had long-term community partnerships that or been involved in any?
I used to in education.
Yeah.
Definitely. And for that, it was a lot of give back, such as giving presentations and free PD to their faculty. That was really huge. And also going in and doing some coaching as far as being a teacher is concerned, especially when it came to incorporating engagement factors in their classroom, and also things such as how to get the students just more involved in general, and decreasing teacher talk and increasing student content related talk. So I did that a lot. And it was good because we didn't really have funding to do anything with them. I actually had funding for a couple teachers to take a summer program with us, but we didn't have funding for the entire faculty. So I also would teach them things and have them turnkey their faculty. So it was nice to just have some leaders in there.
that sharing that expertise that might take an hour or a couple hours of your time to prep is huge. It is huge. And people really value that, especially when they're trying to like diversify the exposure of their students or their clientele to different opportunities. It's a big deal.
I agree. It was over 10 years ago, and I still get emails in my private email from past principals and whatnot asking for resources or ideas for engagement. Great. Anybody else has any comments or questions, go ahead and please present them. If not, you are free to go. We just ask that you do complete the survey at some time, either from the link that I provided or in the emails that I send up following. And I know that one person did, Amy asked for the micro-credential. I'll be sending that along to you either tonight or tomorrow. I'll have you review it to see if you really want to do it first. I always do that. And then I make a personal timeline with you. We make it flexible. And if you need to extend that timeline, we extend the timeline. Because the whole idea of this is to get the learning done when you want to get it done. So I'm really open to a lot of flexibility there. And thank you very much, Laurene. Thank you very much for the excellent presentations. Grace, thank you for being your excellent presentation in workshop 2, and also for helping out with the breakout sessions. We really appreciate your expertise. And everyone, thank you for coming. And if you are all set, feel free to just sign out. Thank you.
And we will send that link to the article.
Actually,
thank you.
Grace already put it in the chat, so we're ready to go. You have such an efficient and effective team.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.